Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AZ 500 series. And today we are going to start the new module, Azure AD Identity Governance. It's very important, very interesting, and absolutely necessary from security perspective. And AZ 500 is all about security, right? So let's get into it and understand what it is and what all topics we need to cover. The very first thing we need to put the base before we start this. And you guys could easily guess when I'll start talking about the privileged identities that we're gonna cover privileged identities management in this. But prior to that, let's put some perspective, because privileged identities are attractive to attackers. Why? Because they are privileged, they have more rights, they can do more damage, and they can be used to gain broad access to an environment, often resulting in a significant business impact. And identity governance helps us or equips us, ensures that the risk to an organization is reduced even if a user account is compromised. So let's put this in perspective again. Even if the account is compromised, identity governance can have some kind of control in place, which can still help or stop the lateral movement or uh, business impact or any big privileges that identities has would be taken care by this. And to achieve this, processes needs to be in place to ensure that privileged access is granted to the right people. We always talk about least privileged principle. So we should have the privileged access to the right people only for the duration that it is needed. Because you may be the owner of subscription, but you're not working as owner 24/7. You may have an 8-hour shift, and out of 8 hour you need owner privilege for maybe 30 minutes or 1 hour. Then why you have that access 24/7, 365? Getting my point? So only for the duration that is needed and removed when the duration expires. So the point is, you need that privileged access only when you have to do certain tasks which require that access. You don't need that access all the time. This way, the chances of an adversary gaining privileged access that could be used to cause significant damage can be reduced drastically. And we have other controls in place, like identity protection can help us figure it out as quickly as possible. And you could have, sign-in risk and user risk. You might have changed the password and ask them to do certain task. If the device is not compliant, we can get the device compliant first. There are like multiple things. The entire life cycle can be created in this way. But for now, identity governance will help us to take care of our privileged identities, or to govern the privileged identity in such a way that even if they compromise, there would be minimum business impact. So in this module of the identity governance, we will understand how to implement the principles of identity governance using Azure AD privileged identity management. There we go. And access reviews provided by PIM, and of course, entitlement management. These three things we're going to explore in this identity governance module. So let's start with the PIM, Privileged Identity Management. And before I start, I hope we have the scenario, the perspective in place for understanding what we are doing, why we are doing, and how we'll say. So, privileged identity management. Before we hit the privileged identity management, we need to understand the privileged identity, right? So, let me go to the next slide. Here we have principles to protect privileged identities. And these things in combined will get us to the PIM. But for now, a privileged identity has certain permissions or privileged permissions or has administrative permissions for your environment. These identities uh, have more access than anyone else in your environment. They are usually limited to a small number of users, which may include IT administrators or business users responsible for managing a line of business applications like global admin. We have help desk administrator, we have subscription owner. You understand, right? There are certain roles which has access that you could call privileged. I have explained it like trying to explain this from 5 minutes. Hopefully, this is clear. A privileged identity. Now, how are you going to manage it? So, uh, when we're thinking about protecting privileged access, here are some principles. Where's my mouse? Here are some principles that we may want to adopt, and all these would be fulfilled in certain way with the help of privileged identity management, which is a Azure AD Premium P2 feature. So let's see these principles first. Access should only be granted to people that require it. Least privilege principle, we know that. We always fulfill it. Doesn't matter whether it's privileged or we are doing PIM, we always do that. Access should only be granted when needed, just in time. There we go. It's a good feature. So it's the same thing that we put the idea in perspective that you don't need privileged permissions 24/7. You only need when you have to do that task, just in time. Access should only be granted at the level that is needed, just enough administration, right? Access should only be granted for the duration that it is needed, that is time bound. So these are some principles that help us to secure the privileged identities, and our Azure AD Premium P2 feature, privileged identity management, help us to fulfill that. So what is Azure AD privileged identity management? So let's put it in a simple words, because till now we know what it is, but let's put it in words. It is an Azure service that helps us to manage privileged administrative role assignments to Azure AD and Azure resources. We understand there are two kind of role assignment, Azure AD and Azure resources. We have covered this in the previous video as well. With PIM configured, we can minimize the number of people who have privileged access to Azure AD and Azure resources, and only grant the required access when needed and for the duration that it is needed. And it's a P2 license feature. Now, how does Azure AD PIM works? So here I have this slide where I have explained the entire flow. So let's say that an admin David wants to ensure that a user Brenda can be assigned to global admin. role in Azure AD by PIM whenever she needs to perform a task that requires this role. So David will make Brenda eligible to activate the global admin role whenever she needed it. Same goes with the Bradley. We're thinking to give it subscription owner whenever the task required Bradley to be owner. So we're gonna make Bradley eligible for this role through PIM. So step one would be this David will need administrative privileges in PIM to be able to complete this configuration process, right? Because if you do not have the access, how can you provide somebody else access? So you should have the administrative privileges in PIM. In step two, once the admin has the right privilege, they will need to onboard the roles that they want to protect into PIM. In this case, Azure AD Global Admin role and the Azure Resource Owner role, we are going to onboard in PIM so that we can give access to these roles through PIM. And David can configure a time limit for which the onboarded roles can be assigned. For example, he can configure the global admin role in Azure AD to be assignable for maximum 2 hours or 3 hours. Right? That is configurable. In step three, David can make Brenda eligible for the global admin role and Bradley eligible for the subscription role. Eligible means that the user can request to be assigned the role by PIM whenever they need it to perform a task. So it's not like they are making themselves owner or global admin whenever they need the access, but they will request it. They are eligible to get that access. So they will request it, then the approval in place, and you can have that approval approved, and then can have that access for that particular time duration. So basically, this is what it is. Is trying to put this again in perspective how this is happening, but you can easily understand when we will try on Azure portal. Wonderful. So there is our Azure portal. We are in default directory. Where we have to go? Security? What do you think? Or you can simply type here Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. Now you need to click where? You need to click on, see, these are the things that you're going to manage: Azure AD roles, Azure resources. Click on manage because you want to manage it. Now I do not have the license. It requires P2 license, but I have all the screenshots captured. You need to click on add assignments because you are creating an assignment and assign it to your identity like Brenda and Bradley we did. So we add assignment is all about getting the roles that you are going to manage through PIM. So it will look like this. Add assignment. So which role we want to assign to our user through PIM is the billing admin role. Okay. Then select the member to whom we want to assign this role. You have selected the Brenda. Then next, once this is assigned, because in previous slide we select this and assigned. Once we assign this, here it is, eligible or active. You can make it active all the time, but we want it to be eligible. We select eligible and we assigned. And now it is showing under assignments as this. Okay. Then now if you go to the roles, click on the billing admin role, there are multiple settings that we can choose, select, and configure, like time or the justification, ticket information, things like that. We can see that in our next slide. Now, when you configure that, the first is activation. sorry, the first is activation. So we can activate it for like 3 hours. We can ask for the MFA or none. We can require the justification. For now, we have selected this one. We also require the approval. We have selected this one. We have selected the approver who will approve this. And then we click on the assignment. And this slide comes under assignment. We can have allow permanent eligible or allow permanent active. We don't want active. Active means the guy has the access all the time. We want eligible. So we selected this. For 6 months, after that, it will be expired and require justification. Then we hit the notification, and this window comes where we have role assignment alert. Once it activated, we'll get the alert to the admin. Notification to the assigned user. Assignee will also get the alert. Request to approve a role assignment renewal. Approver. So we can have those kind of notifications configure and update. And in the next, we can see now we have logged in as the user whom we have assigned this role, and that person can activate from here under the assignment again. Activate. Once he or she activating, then he needs to give the justification, because that's what we have selected in the previous slide for 3 hours. And once the justification is done, then the admin will approve it, and user would have that particular access for that particular duration of time. That's the privileged identity management. I hope you enjoyed, like the video. Thank you for watching, and you guys have a good day.